The most prolific serial killer that we just heard about has over 90 victims, and he chooses them based on what their neck looks like. Welcome to our channel, where we talk all things true crime. This video is for educational purposes based on public knowledge. We do give our opinions at the end, but please do your own research. Let's get started. Today we are talking about Samuel Little and the horrific crimes he committed. He has more victims than Ted Bundy, the Zodiac Killer, and the Golden State Killer combined. Little's reign of terror would span over 3 decades. Let's examine what he did and how he got away with it for so long.
In 1940, Little was born as Samuel McDowell to a teenage lady of the night in Georgia. It was thought that his mother left him on the street corner when he was very young, possibly only a toddler. He would be raised by his grandmother. Family said Little was nothing but trouble. He was disciplined 47 times and even was sent to a reform school for stealing bikes.
Little recalls being attracted to women's necks from a very young age, even as early as kindergarten when he saw his teacher touching her neck. As a teen, Little collected true crime magazines that depicted the choking of women. In 1956, Little spent time at a juvenile facility after being convicted of breaking and entering in Nebraska.
He was sent to prison in 1961 for breaking into a furniture store in Ohio. By the late 1960s, Little moved to Florida to live with his mother, who abandoned him. He held various jobs, including working at a cemetery and being an ambulance attendant. He spent 3 years in prison for breaking into the furniture store. Little began traveling and had many run-ins with the police in 8 states for crimes including DUI, fraud, shoplifting, solicitation, armed robbery, aggravated assault, and SA.
Little would be arrested over 100 times and only spend a combined time of 10 years behind bars, including doing time for essaying a woman in 1966. In the early 1970s, Little met his girlfriend, Aurelia Jean Dorsey, while in jail. They would be inseparable until her death in 1988. Dorsey would shoplift and rob places while Little would be the getaway driver. This is how they supported themselves and what allowed Little to travel to commit his crimes.
Dorsey was 30 years older than Little. The respect and adoration he showed towards her was thought that Dorsey was a maternal replacement. Shortly after meeting Dorsey, Little's mother and grandmother passed away. It's not thought that Dorsey knew what Little was doing exactly, just that he was up to no good.
Little's first murder victim was thought to be Mary Jo Brosley in Florida in December of 1970. Little would pick up ladies of the night, drug addicts, and homeless women. He saw them as somebody that would not be missed or be reported missing. Little would take the women on a date, usually to eat dinner or for a drink at a bar. Little would watch the women's necks as they ate and drank. He said he didn't care what the women looked like, it was the neck he was attracted to.
Maybe not so much, but
the other stuff really don't be important to me. She could be skinny and narrow.
Right.
She could be ugly.
She could be fat. She could be skinny. That you think you're going to kill a
No,
person.
no. If you want, depends on how her neck looks. Got a smooth neck and turn. As a child, I got attracted to
The neck part.
Yeah.
So you pick them out by the way that their neck looks, because if the neck looks good, then it might be somebody that you want to have sex with, or somebody that you might want to kill. What's the thought? Both. Okay.
He compared the picking of these women to picking grapes from a vine. Disgusting.
Who the hell was doing it?
Yeah.
I'll go back to the same city sometime and pluck me another grape. How many grapes y'all got on the vine here?
Sure.
That one, right?
There's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
so basically these were women nobody would miss.
Little would end the lives of these women by manual strangulation. Only one victim would be drowned. He would only use his hands. If he couldn't use his hands, he wouldn't do it.
Shoot any of these girls?
Shoot.
Yeah, with a gun.
I get no kick out of shooting.
All right. So everything was done by manual strangulation. Did you ever use like a belt or a cloth or
No
anything?
Garrett's, no that, no.
No ligatures at all?
My hands.
Just your
And
hands?
without that, I wouldn't want to do it.
Little had close encounters with being caught. There were at least 2 times that the police pulled up on Little right after he had ended a woman's life and she was lying dead in his car. Little was able to talk his way out of the police poking around any further.
Little had a very distinct mode of operation, or MO. He was very particular about the type of victim he chose. He would take them out and then drive them to a secluded area in the middle of the night, have relations with them, hit them over the head, and strangle them. Little would then dump the bodies where he didn't think they would be detected, usually just rolling them out of his car and down hills into densely wooded areas to be concealed by vegetation. His process was quick, and he got out of the area immediately.
Because Little's victims were spread out between many states, it would take time to connect the crimes to him. DNA would be collected from the scene, but DNA processing wasn't perfected until the late 1990s. Eventually, Little would be tied to two murders in 1982. Melinda LaPree in Mississippi and Patricia Mount in Florida. In Melinda's case, her body wasn't found until weeks later, so there was not enough evidence to tie Little to her death, so a grand jury refused to indict.
Little was extradited to Florida for Patricia's case. There were actually eyewitnesses that placed Little with Patricia on the night of her disappearance, and hair and fiber evidence was present. Unfortunately, there was a mistrust of the witnesses' testimony because they lived a similar lifestyle as Little's other victims. Little was acquitted in January of 1984.
After the acquittal, Little traveled to California, living in the San Diego area. In October 1984, Little was arrested for kidnapping, beating, and strangling 22-year-old Lori Barrows, who luckily survived. 1 month later, Little attempted to take the life of another woman in the exact spot that he tried to take Lori's. Police would find him with an unconscious woman, also beaten and strangled. Little only got 2.5 years in prison for both of these crimes, which is mind-blowing that he received such little time.
Fast forward to September of 2012, and although cases had gone cold, detectives never gave up on them. They began running the DNA from the old cases through the CODIS system, which was well established by now. Little's DNA was matched to 3 women's cold cases in Los Angeles: Linda Alford from 1987, Guadalupe Apodaca from 1987, and Audrey Nelson from 1989.
Little was picked up in a homeless shelter in Kentucky, now a 71-year-old man. He was extradited to California on an old narcotics charge, and authorities performed DNA testing to establish if it was his DNA that matched the victims. Little stood trial for 3 women that were found on the streets of Los Angeles and was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
Later in 2018, Little asked to speak with investigators. He told them he had more information for them, but he wanted a letter from the prosecuting attorney that the death penalty would not be pursued if he disclosed this information. Once Little received the letter, he began telling investigators about how horrific and long-spanning his crimes really were. He confessed to 93 murders from 1970 to 2005 across 14 states. He had actually stopped committing crimes 7 years before his capture, probably because of his physical power being reduced by aging.
Investigators were leery of trusting that Little was telling the truth. This wouldn't be the first time a criminal confessed to crimes that he didn't commit. This was different though. Little had a photographic memory. He did not take trophies from his victims because his memories were his trophies. Little gave very detailed descriptions that the investigators were able to run down and confirm. Little knew some of their names, knew exactly where he had picked them up and dumped them. He could tell you what they were wearing, down to the buttons and zippers on their clothing. Little even confirmed one victim by what she had eaten right before her demise.
At this point, Little was in his late 70s and confined to a wheelchair. As he confessed, he was smiling, and you could see a far-off look in his eyes. He was reliving his crimes in real time, almost as if he was reminiscing. It was clear that he hated women. Little began drawing all of his victims. One thing that is noticeable about these drawings is that he drew petechial hemorrhaging in their eyes, which are small pinpoint hemorrhages that are generally a sign of terminal asphyxia. Little would confess to reviving his victims just to begin the manual strangulation process all over again. Little showed no remorse for his actions.
Before Little's death of natural causes in 2020, he had been linked to over half of his confessions. 52 of the cases were able to be closed, and the detectives are still investigating the remaining 41 cases of the 93 that Little confessed to.
So what do we think?
It's interesting that he's not really talked about that much.
No.
Like, not one of the more
Infamous
ones?
I just heard about him a few weeks ago. I couldn't actually say that I'd ever heard of him before, but once going through research and I saw some of his drawings, that's the only thing I ever remember were the drawings like on a news thing, but there wasn't a lot of details that stated what he did.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of him, which is weird. So where was he from again? Georgia?
So he was born in Georgia. He lived in Ohio kind of growing up some, then moved to Florida, and then traveled all over.
Did he have a nickname?
Not that I'm aware of. As far as I know, he did not have a nickname. I poured over all kinds of articles and resources trying to get all of the information, and at no point did a nickname come up. But that might be also because it was spread out across 14 states over 35 years. None of them were even remotely linked together till towards the end.
The fact that his girlfriend was 30 years older, that's really weird.
So let me tell you how they met. It was this big, long thing. He got arrested with his girlfriend, who I believe's name was Lucy or something. I believe they were shoplifting. They're in this jail. The jail had been built in the 1930s that they were being kept in, so it was really run down, holes in the walls, this and that. Well, his girlfriend, Dorsey, was bunkmates with Lucy.
Oh.
His later on girlfriend, Dorsey. So his current girlfriend, Lucy, was bunking with Dorsey, and Lucy was forgotten about. They forgot to charge her, so she's just sitting in this jail cell for 6 months, and at this point, she's so pissed. She's telling her bunkmate she's gonna narc out Little so that he goes to jail and she gets out of the shoplifting charge. Well, Dorsey, being a career criminal, felt the need to let him know that his girlfriend gonna testify against him, but she had never even met him. So she's getting messages through all these holes in the walls. It gets back to him that Lucy's gonna testify. So basically his attorneys were prepared for that, and they basically were able to shut it down, and he didn't get convicted at all. And then they met once they got out of the jail. So they never physically saw each other or met, but once they got out of jail, it's like they got together and were completely inseparable.
That's
almost
weird.
like, what is it, kismet?
I don't know, that's weird.
It was like predestined or something for them to be together. Well, they were both criminals, and so she would go in, rob the place, hold him up, he would be in the car, then they would get away real fast so they didn't get caught too often. I mean, he did go to jail for other things, but he never got a lot of time. It's baffling to me that he would be arrested over 100 times, sometimes for very heinous crimes, and only would serve a total of 10 years between all of those things.
It's really disturbing. Of course, this was probably before they had where it was linked all the states, you could see what they were charged with before. So if it's in different states, they might be treating it like a first offense.
Yeah, I'm sure that they were.
But either way, what he was doing, he should have been in jail a lot longer.
But he would go back to the same states. He had 93 victims that he confessed to. Of course, only 52 are linked to him, but it's only between 14 states.
Yeah.
So that's several victims in one state alone. And he had the exact same MO with all of them, except for that first one that he drowned. But he perfected his MO. But if there was no flag in the system, like you're saying, if there really wasn't a system to be flagged, if it's in another county on the other side of the state or something. So basically technology had to catch up to him to be
He wasn't
caught.
a suspect either, was he?
No, the only cases that he was eyewitnessed in were the ones that he got acquitted of. That one. There was the Florida case and the Mississippi case that they know that he did it. They just couldn't prove it. And unfortunately, the witnesses that saw Patricia leave with him, they were also, I believe, ladies of the night and or users. So the police were like, oh, they're not credible. You can't believe anything they say. And basically the prosecutors ran with that. Back then, I believe the public and law enforcement had a very negative view on people like that and didn't treat them as real people.
Yeah.
And so they were just dismissed and discarded like they weren't real people. So basically they're like, you got nothing, so you're acquitted.
Man, that's crazy.
Absolutely. But there are still several women that are unidentified, and their information is out there as far as where they were found, approximately what age they were, how they looked as far as height, skin complexion, all of that. We can put the list on the screen of those people just to help get that information out there, because these women still need to be identified. And they are still investigating, so they're tracking down all of this information that he had given. And then once they can find these cases in the system, link him to them. But there's still a bunch that are unnamed, and they're just Jane Does.
Oh.
Which is really sad.
Yeah, that is really sad when they don't even know who you are.
I don't feel like you can really be laid to rest. just being out there waiting to be identified. So what do you guys think? Have you heard of this case? Let us know in the comments below.